Hey, Dr. SheRich here. You are about to watch episode 2 of my podcast, Surviving with SheRich. And I want to thank each and every one of you for the overwhelming support with episode 1. It was such a blessing to me. So, as you watch this episode, it's actually part 2 of my story. And in this episode, not only do I recap some of what I talked about in episode 1 with my trauma, but now I talk about what are those steps, the practical steps, the strategies, the support, the resources that God put in place for me to help me move from trauma to triumph. So I hope this episode blesses you. And again, when you walk away from it, I really hope it helps propel you on your journey toward healing and wholeness. If it blesses you and you know it can bless somebody else, remember to share it. And if you have not done so already, why don't you click that like and subscribe button so that you can be notified of all of the upcoming episodes that I have where other people are sharing their stories of victory. Thank you, and I hope it blesses you. Welcome to Surviving with SheRich, the podcast where we help those silenced by trauma regain their voice. I'm your host, Dr. Sherri Richardson. Join my guests and me as we share inspiring stories of resilience and practical steps toward healing within a supportive community. Thank you for tuning in, and let's get started on this empowering journey from trauma to triumph, surviving to thriving, one story at a time. Hello, everyone, my beautiful audience. I want to take a moment to welcome you to Surviving with SheRich. This is actually part 2 of my survivor story. I am Dr. Sherri Richardson, your host for this program and this podcast. And again, thank you so much for tuning in with me. Our first episode that I launched, I actually shared a lot of me, my story, my background, some of the low points in my life. And I promised you that when I did this next episode, that I was going to share, probably recap some of those, but then the turning points, the points in my life that changed me from that constant downward trajectory toward hurt and pain and discouragement to the upward trajectory toward healing and overcoming and victory. And so as we go into this episode today, that's really what I want to hone in on. I think back, and I want to just talk back really quickly as I was reflecting on that first episode that I did. I talked about my life being a roller coaster. There were many highs, there were many lows, there were many peaks, there were many valleys. But through it all, I'm grateful because I know what God put in place for me to help me get past that. And so that's really what I want to share with you today. What I did to be able to change the trajectory of my life. And so we oftentimes talk about rock bottom being that one point in our life that is the lowest of lows. But when I think about my life, I can't even say there was a rock bottom. There were several points in my life that felt like the lowest that I had ever been. But one particular point I remember the date so clearly. It was August 23rd, 1987. I was going into my senior year of high school. And an incident occurred, which actually was the final incident of my abuse. And I remember leaving that day, and I talked to you guys in episode 1 about my safe place, my best friend who was the only one I shared that I had been molested. And I got in the car and I went to her house. Actually, no, I didn't even drive. I called her and I asked her to come get me. And she came and she got me and brought me to her house. And I stayed. I didn't tell my parents where I was going. I did not ask permission. I got up. I called her, got up and left. And I stayed there that night. And I remember talking with my mom. She was angry. She was angry because she did not understand why I had the audacity to just get up and leave without permission and stay out overnight and not consult her. But I had made up in my mind that that next day I was going to have a conversation with her and I was going to share with her what I was going through. And that particular day, August 23rd, 1987, changed not just my life, but it changed my entire family's lives. I felt like I broke my mother's heart that day. And I carried that for years. Because anybody who knows when you are a product of abuse, one of the things that you do is you blame yourself, you hold on to guilt and shame, and those seeds that are planted into you when different situations happen, they grow. And so for me, I held on to that and I felt so bad that I hurt my mom so much, not realizing that had I not been in the situation in the first place, that day would have happened. But again, when you're young and you're experiencing certain things, you don't know how to process that information. You don't know what to do with it or how to properly share it. And so when I think back to that particular day, that was one of those really, really low points in my life, really low points. Rock bottom, whatever you want to call it. That was one of them. On the roller coaster, that was one of those dips, quick drops that take your breath away and you're trying to catch it. That's what I was experiencing. And it was one of the first times. Well, actually, yeah, because I really had only shared it with another person. So it was one of the few times that I used my voice to empower myself to create some type of change. By exposing different things that I was going through, even though it was painful, it freed me from having to experience that in my own life again. And so when I think about the low points or the turning points, that was part of my turning point. It was a pivot to help start me in a direction that I needed to. I received counseling after that from a professional who focused on or specialized in the abuse and sexual abuse of young people. And so that was the beginning part of healing for me. Now, I'm going to share in a little bit many other resources, many other things that God brought into my life to help me get out of that place and put me on a road toward being healthy. But I need you to understand it's a process. It is never a one and done. All of the things that I'm going to share with you in the near future as it relates to resources that helped me heal were not one and done. They've been ongoing. And so I didn't go to counseling one time and say that was it. There were other things that came later on that I did. And again, I'll share that momentarily. But because I used my voice, I then was able to start incrementally taking baby steps toward healing from my past pain. Another turning point that really, really was a true turning point for me happened when I was 32 years old. In my previous church, where I had served for 17 years, I was under a phenomenal leader who I loved. She has gone on to be with the Lord, but she did this women's program, and it was called Woman Warrior, Take Off the Mask. And she knew me and had talked to me, and she knew part of my story. And so she said, Sherri, I would love for you to be one of 10 women who share their stories and take off that mask of pain and hurt and shame so that other people can be set free. And it was at that point when I was working through that women's event that God really began to deliver me and put me on a trajectory of change, healing, deliverance, wholeness. I shared my testimony, part of which I shared with you in these 2 episodes. Not as much. I'm going into far more detail now than I did then. But I shared. I used my voice, and it empowered me, and it helped to empower other women who were encouraged to know they were not the only ones who had endured abandonment, who had endured molestation or abuse, who had endured, divorce and teenage pregnancies and terminations and so many of the things I had gone through. They realized, wow, I can go through all that and still be used by God to help other people. And that was a turning point for me. Shortly after that, I connected with some powerful women of God who were the intercessors of our church. And they were mothers of the church. They had wisdom, they had life experiences, but above all, they had discernment and the ability to help deliver me from the roots, deeply rooted things that I had experienced. And I love these women. Some of them are still here. Some of them, again, have gone on to be with the Lord, but I love them. We had intercessory prayer every week, and week after week after week, God used these women to expose layers. It was almost like an onion. You peel back one, there's another one. You peel back one, there's another one. And week after week, he used these women to help me work through the root and the pain of my past. And as God used them to bring me out, I was then able to bring other people out. I look back in retrospect and I'm like, wow, God, I was an intercessor laying on my feet, on my face, week after week, snotting and crying and, pains in my stomach because I'm trying to let go of things that had me held for so long. And now I look fast forward to 2024 and I'm leading an intercessory prayer team. So don't say, God, can you use me through all of these things? Yes. Yep. Because what he put in you was in you before the foundation of the earth. Before he formed you in your mother's womb, he knew you. He knew what he put in you. He knew what he put in me. And he knew what it was going to take to bring it out of us as well. He knew what we would endure. And even though he doesn't cause this level of pain, he knows how to use it because he is omniscient. He knows everything. He is sovereign. And so he knows my end from my beginning. He knows every single second of my life what is going to happen because he's that great. And he's that concerned that he gives me a way of escape out of what he knows the enemy is going to trap me with, or the snares that he's going to lay before me. He's already given me a way of escape. And I thank God for that, for every single person he has put into my path to help me come out of and then reach back and help others. I'm grateful. I'm so incredibly grateful for it. When I think about the people and the resources that he put into place, my husband, Joe, people hear me say it all the time. He is the most amazing man on the planet. That's what I call him, and that's what he is. The most amazing man on the planet to me. God has used him tremendously to help me heal. He knew I needed him. He knew the broken state I was in. He knew that I was dying. I wasn't living. I wasn't thriving. I was literally surviving and barely doing that. And I got to take a step back for a minute, because Joe is my second marriage. I had a 6-month period of time in my life where my entire world turned upside down. God removed me from a job I was on for almost 10 years, a church I served in ministerial leadership. For 17 years, I was a part of this church. And when I left, I was in ministerial leadership. He brought me out of that. And he brought me out of a marriage, a relationship I was in for 20 years. 10 years, 17 years, 20 years. All of those relationships, God pulled me out of in a 6-month period. One after the other, in a 6-month period. My whole world, everything that was familiar to me, had changed. And it was hard enough for me, but at that point in time in my life, I literally felt like I had been stretched on the cross and was being crucified. That's the pain that I dealt with during that time. I had people who I thought were my friends and who loved me, and who would be there during this difficult time, who turned their backs on me, who talked about me. I was getting information coming left and right, where people were entertaining conversations that were about me and harmful to me and hurtful to me. I had people literally sending me DMs in my Facebook Messenger, calling me everything but a child of God, telling me I was not fit to raise daughters. I had put on a lot of weight. They called me fat. They called me sloppy. I don't even know how certain people would be attracted to you. It was hard. It was a rough period of time in my life. But God kept me. It was December 31st, 2012. I watched night service. I attended at Change Church. It was Kingdom at the time, but Pastor Darius Daniels preached, and I'm trying not to cry, y'all. He preached a word, and it was entitled, "Do Something." And I remember I got there, but it was so crowded. There was no room in the sanctuary, so I was in the overflow. And on so many occasions, as he taught that word that night, he looked at that camera and he said, there is somebody in the overflow who needs to hear the words that I'm speaking. He spoke directly to me. And I wish it they didn't post stuff digitally online at that point. So it was a CD. I really wish that they would find it and upload it to YouTube because it is such a powerful message. But that message changed my life completely. And I thank God because he used Pastor Daniels to not just speak a word into my life that night, but from then until now, God has continued to give him a word for my life. And so when I talk about how I got through situations, how I got to a place where I was able to recover and be where I am at this particular point in time, my church family, my pastors have been instrumental in pouring into me, having an on-time word for my life that has changed me through the years. So my husband has been instrumental. My pastors and my church family, those intercessors, those women who prayed over me and for me have been instrumental. I connect every morning with one of my closest girlfriends. For 8 years, we pray at 5:30 in the morning. And through that time, God has cultivated a relationship with me that I never knew I needed or would ever have with him. Connecting. The Bible says where 2 or 3 gather in my name, touching and agreeing, I'll be there. I'll be there. I'm listening. I'm responding just by the power of partnership and agreement. And I look back through the years, not only have I been able to pray for others and help others get their breakthrough, but I watch God transform me, mature me, grow me, because I committed to meet him in the morning at 5:30 every day. These are all the things that God allowed me to have in my life that have helped me work through these difficult childhood issues and have allowed me to become who I am. And the last thing that I want to share, one of the last things, I have a couple more, but I talked about allowing yourself to connect with people who are professionally trained. My church has learning groups. And I remember during this time when I was going through this 6 months of whatever was happening in my life, I call it the crucifixion of Sherri, but there was a group. It was a grief class, a group that dealt with grief. And the woman who facilitated, I love her. She is a trained professional, Verily Harper. And the very first class, she said, this journey is going to be work. Heart work is hard work. And that stuck with me. Heart work is hard work. And I don't remember if it was 6 weeks. I don't remember if it was 12 weeks. I don't remember how long it was. I just know in that time period, I learned so much and I dug so deep and I put in the work and I was different on the other side. But she was a trained professional This is what she did. And that was important. And so I encourage you, find those people, find those, the confidants, the ones that you can, rely on, your church family, your pastors who are pouring into you. Prayer and time in God's presence. But professional help is necessary also. There are people who God has gifted. They're gifted. They're trained. They have a skill set that He has helped them develop to help other people. And I hope and I pray that you connect, that you find someone who can help you with that. It's so important. And I want to thank I want to thank two people in my family. And I said I love my parents, my bonus parents, my siblings. But I told you in the first episode I was a mouthy one. And there are two other vocal people in my family. My family's very small on my mother's side. There are two other vocal people. Who we share a lot of tendencies, and so I'm grateful for one of my aunts and one of my cousins, who in adulthood I experienced. It was not personal abuse for me, but the incident when it was shared with me took me all the way back to my childhood, and so I reached out to my aunt and I reached out to my cousin at different times. And both of them not only heard me, but encouraged me in the Word of God. They allowed me a space to really vent about our family history and the decisions that we have made as a family. They helped me work through that. And so I'm grateful to them as well, because God used them as a part of my process. My brother, anybody who knows me, I had an older brother. He was my stepbrother. So we were very close in age. We were only 6 months apart, but I didn't call him my stepbrother. We grew up together, so he was my brother. He has yet gone on to be with the Lord, and I miss him every day. But God used him so many times. When I was at low points, he would just call me. He would just my phone would just ring and I would just see it and I'd be like, who's he calling me? And he always called me when I was in a place where I needed encouragement. My brother had his struggles, a lot of which I feel stemmed from our childhood and the trauma, because when I exposed my abuse, it affected all of us. And so I think as a result of that, there were some things that he ended up going through that I feel were directly related to that. But one thing I realized is we loved each other so much. He struggled with drugs for many years, and he would always sober up enough when God placed me on his heart. He sobered up enough to call me, to reach out to me, to encourage me. And one thing I always thanked him for was his obedience. He listened to God, even when he was having in his moment. And one thing he would always say to me after I thanked him for calling and for pouring in, he would say, Pookie, he called me Pookie. He said, Pookie, you always loved me. You never judged me. Even as he went through his struggles, he said, you always loved me. You never judged me. And that's one of the things that I held with me when I think about how I've changed through the years and how I've been able to go back and help others. I've never judged. I don't judge people when they say, I think I'm pregnant. I don't know how to tell my parents. I'm not sure what to do. I don't judge people when they say, I terminated a child and I'm not sure if I'll be able to have children. I feel like that's a part of my punishment. I can encourage them, I can minister to them. I don't judge people who act reckless or go through certain situations because of their brokenness and their pain. I allow my life's experiences to constantly remind me God brought me out so that I can help bring somebody else out. I've been able to love through the years without judgment. I've been able to pour. There are so many people I can speak to and minister to because of my life's experiences. That's why God gets the glory. That's why it works together for my good and his glory. Because he knew this one right here, when I bring her out, she's going to make sure she goes back and she helps others. When he gave me my voice, that was the best thing for me and the worst thing for the enemy. Because what I realized and recognized is the enemy truly comes to steal, kill, and to destroy. But Christ came that we might have life. And when I acknowledged the enemy and what he was doing and how he was using the pain of my past to silence me, his reason for doing that is because he did not want me free, because he knew that I would help other people get free. And as difficult as I talked to my husband a lot before I did these 2 recordings, I had to talk through some of the anxiety and the issues I was feeling at exposing my childhood, because I didn't want to hurt people and I didn't want people to judge other people. I wanted to help, but I wanted to make sure that in doing so, I wasn't harming a lot of people. And so I had to talk through a number of different things. But I realized in those conversations that I had what the enemy was trying to do. By silencing me, he could keep this issue in the dark and it could go on to the next generation because it wasn't exposed. And so, again, I encourage anybody who is watching this. I don't think everybody is called to shout your story from the rooftops. And we have to be mindful how we share. Because at the end of the day, even those who have abused, I know for me, those who have abused me, and it has been multiple people. The door opened from a particular person, but it's been multiple people. And he wanted to use that to silence me. And I encourage you, in sharing your story, it has to still be seasoned with grace, because that's where the glory of God is seen. The glory of God is not seen in me holding a grudge against people who have harmed me. There's no freedom in that. The glory comes when I can say, I love this person. I want them to be healed. I expose this so that no one else can be hurt or affected, but I also still want to reach back to the generational patterns and why they actually started in the first place. But I have to do that in a way that's healthy. And it's important to realign people and make adjustments. You can still love, but sometimes people have to be realigned. God showed me years ago, if anybody plays darts, there's the outer circle. The outer circle is big. There's a lot that can fit in it, but the point value is not very great. And then you have your middle circle, which is smaller, but the point value is greater than the outer circle. And then finally, you have that bullseye, which is small. The bullseye area is very small. A lot cannot fit in that space, but the point value is so much greater. And so I realized through the years that there were some people really close to me that I had to make adjustments. I had to realign their position so that I could be healthy and I can continue to love them, because loving them is a mandate by God. God is love. And if I cannot experience that and show that, I'm not representing him well. But how do I do that? By making adjustments, by sharing so that generations beyond me don't have to continue in the patterns that we've had in the past, but doing it with a level of grace and mercy that has been shown upon me. And that's the message that as I finish my final thoughts in preparation of closing out this episode, I want to really leave you with with these points. Acknowledge your hurt, your pain, your decisions. Acknowledge the enemy's desire to steal, kill, and to destroy. Recognize him and how he uses pain of our past to hinder how we operate in the future. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge your own poor decisions that have hurt you and others. And then take the next step, which is forgiveness. Yeah, I had to recognize who I was angry with, who I was upset with. I had to recognize the shame and the guilt that I felt with my own self. But then I had to forgive. I had to forgive those people. I had to forgive myself. And I had to ask other people to forgive me. And then finally, I had to connect. I had to connect with people and resources that would help me in that journey. As I said, I am grateful in my younger years for my two older daughters who helped me at one of the low points in my life. But I have another baby girl as well who helped me when I was older. I experienced a situation, like I said, that took me back to the memories of my childhood. And my baby girl was such an inspiration for me. She encouraged she encouraged me so much. And she still is. She inspires me to face my pain, to deal with what I'm going through and my issues and my struggles. And so I'm grateful for my babies. I thank God for my husband. His love, his observance, his consistency, his patience has loved me to a place of health. I never thought I would trust a man. I never thought I could be vulnerable. I never thought A man could make me feel safe in every area of my life, spiritually, physically, emotionally, financially. I never thought a man could do that. And God connected me with Joe, the most amazing man on the planet to me. And I'm grateful. And I'm thankful for my mother. Despite life, despite life, my mother has loved me, encouraged me, poured into me, kept me in the face of God. Was she perfect? No, none of us are. But when I think about the example of a godly woman and a godly man, it's my mom. It's my mom. I have hurt her with my words and other things out of anger. She stayed right there with me. And even though I don't feel like she always made the best decisions for my life, we are still here. We are still strong, and she still wants what's best for me. And so I am grateful and thankful for her, for my family. Oh, I'm grateful for all of the survivors out there who are going to now dig deep within yourselves to face the pain of your past, to turn your trauma into triumph, your pain into power, and to move from surviving to thriving. I'm proud of you and I'm thankful for you, because you just may be the one God has chosen to be the change agent in your family. So I thank each and every one of you for tuning in to this episode of Surviving with SheRich. This is my voice. This is my story. And I'm grateful. Again, if this episode touched you, helped you in any way, or you know someone that it could help, please share it. Please share it and encourage them to subscribe to my channel. Because as I move forward with this podcast, I'm bringing on people who have gone through so many different experiences of pain. And they are going to not only share their stories with you, but the steps that they took to be able to heal from losing a child, from their teenage pregnancy experience, from a cancer battle, or staring death in the face, infertility, so many different stories, mental and emotional issues and battles and illnesses. This is who I'm going to be bringing on to this show. And so I encourage you, share it, like, and subscribe. And lastly, I want to leave you with Israel Houghton, one of my favorite gospel artists. He has a song called The Power of One. And in the song, he asks, what if it was solely my responsibility to change the world? What if my purpose was not an option, but a mandate? What if it was on me and my voice and my story to change the world? Would I do that? Or would I continue to suffer in silence, thinking, somebody else, it's on somebody else, they'll do it? There's a power of one. One voice can change a family, a community, a state, a region, a world. So I encourage you as you move forward in life, face the pain of your past and allow God to use it so that other people can be delivered, set free along with you. Thank you so much and be blessed. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Surviving with SheRich. If this content helped you, hit like, subscribe, and share. And remember to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Dr. SheRich4.